Hello, my name is Ava Thompson Caldwell. I'm candidate number 3002 and my center number is UX725, and this is my creative critical reflection. The first thing that I would like to talk about is convention and representation, more specifically how I used preconceived ideas to aid in storytelling. Because of time constraint, I relied heavily on convention to convey the message of loss and the fact that the main character's mother had died. There was a brief clip when we see her obituary, but it is blurry and the credits distract from it. So instead I used somber music. The main character was dressed in all black. Another character was dressed in black. Black is a color that people associate with funerals and death. When color grading, I lowered the exposure and added blue tint. The title cards are also blue. Blue is a color that's generally associated with sadness. In terms of representation, this film opening touches on the complex dynamics that immigrants and people of color have with their parents. Oftentimes, immigrants and people of color are stricter and much more heavily involved in making decisions for their children's future and can even be a bit controlling compared to their white American peers. Meaning, parents in these cultures are viewed as if they should and do have the primary say in their children's lives. This is reflected in media. Several mainstream films cover this, and it is becoming a popular topic on social media. It is a very important theme in movies such as Crazy Rich Asians, Turning Red, and Encanto. There is a scene in Crazy Rich Asians where the lead, Rachel Chu, travels to Singapore from New York and meets her boyfriend's family. His mother, Eleanor, compliments Rachel and says that her mother must be proud of her for becoming a professor at NYU, and Rachel replies with, She knows I'm passionate about what I do, and she's always wanted that for me. Eleanor then says, pursuing one's passion, how American. Your mother is very open-minded, not like here, where parents are obsessed with shaping the lives of their children. Eleanor's attitude isn't uncommon, so it was very intentional that the main character in my film fought with her mother, who is clearly not American, because of her use of Portuguese and their accents about where she should go to school, and subsequently what she should do with her life. This is a very realistic conversation and a common point of contention. I can personally attest to having similar disagreements. I don't view this as negative representation, it is true, but I must confess that the narrative is getting somewhat tired. Countless shows such as Never Have I Ever and Euphoria feature the same types of conflicts. I wish I'd been able to represent more positive aspects. Coming from an immigrant family means having a very strong sense of culture and community. The next thing I would like to discuss is engagement. When you create with the audience and distribution in mind. Because of the fact that the main character is very young, she's not even in college yet, I imagine that there would be a young audience. Young audiences often have shorter attention spans, which is one of the reasons the first 2 minutes were so fast-paced. Coming-of-age narratives and dramas are very synonymous with companies like A24. I imagine that if this film was made, it would be marketed and distributed in the same way that films like Lady Bird or the TV show Euphoria are. They are on streaming services like Netflix and HBO Max. They also have a strong social media presence. The cast members are active on social media, and in fact there is a Euphoria YouTube channel. Netflix also has multiple social media accounts and it promotes its content. HBO Max generally does the same. If my film were to get made, I imagine that similar methods would be applied. As I mentioned in my blog, I had to learn a lot of new skills when creating the film opening. I had never been responsible for producing, writing, directing, and essentially organizing everything involved with a film before. I'd learned how to professionally communicate, secure a location to film. To do this, I emailed a real estate office and was able to film at the model homes and housing community. I defined actors, arrange times for us to rehearse, go over logistics, make sure people knew what time they needed to be places, had rides, and their schedules aligned with the times that I was allowed to film, those sort of things. Taking the lead and responsibility for something like this wasn't really anything I had experience with. When writing the script, I also had to learn about storytelling, what makes a good compelling film opening, and how to capture your audience's attention. I watched several videos on creating good opening scenes to come up with one that I was happy with. There were also technical skills that I had to improve to do this. I had to do more research on how to use my camera better. I have a professional grade DSLR, but I wasn't really using it to its full extent before this, and I had to watch videos on how to get the best quality images. Even still, I ended up making mistakes, which I will talk about later. I also watched videos on cinematic composition, and before this, I never used Premiere Pro or any app in the Adobe suite. The extent of my editing experience was iMovie, and those are no way comparable to any Adobe software, which is incredibly complex. In a very short time, I had to learn about all the different assets of video editing. This experience made evident to me that technology is an essential part of the filmmaking process. I mentioned earlier that I watched a lot of YouTube videos to supplement my knowledge. That was one of the forms of technology I used. Because we are in online school, we weren't able to physically meet up, so we used Zoom to have rehearsals and meetings. I used Google Docs to share schedules and scripts. As I mentioned before, I had to get familiar with my Nikon, which is what I shot the entire film on. I had to learn about its settings, exposure, aperture, shutter speed, all of those things that really impact your images. I had to get a better understanding of the different file types and how to share them, which was important because I also mentioned that my knowledge of Premiere Pro greatly increased. I had no idea to the extent of my ignorancy about video editing. I never even heard the term color grading before, which obviously is a big aspect of creating a film. I've spent hours on Premiere Pro these past several weeks. It has probably been my most used app. I also got a better understanding of audio recording and editing, but unfortunately, I did most of my learning about that after I shot the video. I also learned about what type of mic to use, how to eliminate wind sounds, and all of that equipment. When editing, I learned how to overlay images and create these effects that I always had questions about before. I also used websites to convert file types, and for this, to create this critical reflection, I'm using Premiere Pro. During the year, we had to chronicle everything using Google Sites. This experience really has made me appreciate the level of expertise and understanding of technology that filmmakers have. Now it is time to reflect and talk about things that I would have done differently, what I liked, and what I would change in the future. I'm most proud of the idea I came up with, writing the script, and that whole process. I'm very proud of how I handled that and organizing everything. But I think I should have been more detailed when planning my shots. In the past, I've showed up to a set without a script or a shot list, and while it took me a bit longer, I was able to get the content that I needed, but I wasn't responsible for editing. So I never realized to what extent you have to plan things. You have to know exactly how you want your shot to look. My biggest mistake was probably only planning what the content of shots would be. This led to issues with lighting. There's shots that there's a lot of light coming from one direction. There's too much light on an actor's face, issues like that. Another big issue that I had was not getting a sleeve for my microphone. I actually used the built-in microphone of my Nikon instead of using my detachable one, which would have eliminated a lot of the audio quality issues that I have. The next regret I have is probably the fact that I was unable to use my tripod. I was missing a piece and I wasn't able to attach my camera to it, so I ended up having to hold the camera by hand for the entirety of the shots, which when used, correctly intentionally can help transport the audience into the film more. But because of the shakiness of the footage, I had to use stabilizer in Premiere Pro, which compromised its quality. Most of my issues came down to a lack of planning and just a lack of understanding all of the details and the thought that goes into creating, which in the future I will definitely take into account, and I've learned a lot from this. Thank you for your time. I'm very glad to have taken this course. This is my last year in the AICE program, and the thoughtfulness and intentionality in which you have to approach filmmaking is definitely something that I will take with me.